Tucked away on the side of a quiet residential street in Westford, Massachusetts, lies a slab of stone that shouldn't be there. To the casual glance, it's just a rock with a series of faint scratches and grooves. But if you look closer, and if you know the story, those scratches begin to form a shape that is startlingly out of place. This is the Westford Knight, and it appears to be the crude, ancient etching of a medieval swordsman in full armor, a spectral figure from European history gazing up from the New England bedrock. The central image, which becomes clearer in certain lights or with the aid of historical tracings, is a life-sized figure holding a massive, double-edged sword. The weapon is the most distinct element, with a clear pommel, grip, and guard, and it points directly north. The rest of the figure is fainter, but believers see the outline of a helmet and a shield, upon which some claim to discern heraldic symbols. The technique used is known as punch hole or pecking, where a metal tool is used to create a series of indentations to form an image. But who was this knight? And what could possibly have brought him to Massachusetts centuries before Columbus set sail? The most captivating theory points to a Scottish nobleman, Prince Henry Sinclair, the Earl of Orkney. The story goes that in the late 1390s, inspired by tales from a fisherman who had been blown off course, Sinclair led an expedition across the Atlantic. He is said to have wintered in Nova Scotia before sailing south to explore the New England coast. An inland party, traveling up rivers and over hills, would have reached the area now known as Westford. According to this legend, one of Sinclair's men, a Knight Templar named Sir James Gunn, fell ill and died during this expedition. To memorialize their fallen comrade, the ship's armorer used his tools to painstakingly punch the knight's effigy into the stone, a permanent memorial in a foreign land. The broken sword, a symbol of a life cut short and a common feature on European funerary monuments, would make perfect sense in this context. But this is where the mystery truly deepens. The carving was first officially described in 1873, where it was dismissed as a rude figure likely cut by some Indian artist. It wasn't until 1954 that researcher Frank Glynn, guided by earlier theories and correspondence, chalked in the full figure of a knight, igniting the controversy that surrounds the stone to this day. Skeptics, like archaeologist Ken Feder, offer a more mundane explanation. They argue that the stone is a combination of natural glacial striations, the parallel grooves left by retreating ice ages, and a partial sword that may have been added much more recently, perhaps in the 19th century. They point out that the image seems to have become clearer over time, which defies the natural logic of weathering and erosion. Furthermore, some geologists believe the rock would have been buried under several feet of soil in the 14th century, making it inaccessible for carving. So what are we to believe? Is this the grave of a Templar knight, a piece of evidence that rewrites the history of exploration, connected to legends of the Holy Grail being brought to the New World for safekeeping? Or is it a fascinating example of pareidolia, where our minds impose a familiar image onto random natural marks, later embellished by human hands? The rock itself offers no easy answers. The weathering has taken its toll, and the image is now harder to see than ever. The Westford Knight remains an enigma, a ghost in the stone, challenging us to question what we think we know about the timeline of the ancient world. If a Scottish knight did indeed die here in 1399, what other secrets are still hidden in the soil of New England? While the Westford Knight presents a visual puzzle, another Massachusetts artifact offers a mystery of language. In the town of Bourne on Cape Cod sits a 300-pound slab of granite that has baffled historians, linguists, and archaeologists for generations. Known as the Bourne Stone, it is covered with 2 lines of strange, deeply carved characters that resemble writing, yet belong to no known alphabet. This is not a picture, but a potential message, and its meaning has been hotly debated for over a century. It is an inscription that no one has been able to definitively decode, a locked door to the past with a key that seems forever lost. The known history of the stone only adds to its mystery. It was first recorded as the doorstep to a Native American meeting house built in the late 1600s. For years, people walked over it, unaware or unconcerned with the markings on its surface. Some folklore even suggests it was placed face down to prevent local Wampanoag people from being alarmed by the strange symbols. It passed through various owners, surviving a house fire in 1932, before eventually finding a home in a museum where it could be preserved and studied. But the central question remains: were the carvings already ancient when the meeting house was built, or were they added later by colonial hands? The historical record is silent, opening the door to a whirlwind of theories. The attempts to translate the Bourne Stone read like a history of alternative archaeology. In the 20th century, Frederick Pohl and runic expert Olaf Strandwold declared the writing to be Norse, translating it as, "Jesus amply provides for us here in heaven." This would support the idea of Viking explorers reaching Cape Cod long before other Europeans. Then, in the 1970s, the controversial epigrapher Barry Fell proposed a radically different origin. After studying the stone, he announced the script was Iberic, a variation of the Punic alphabet from ancient Carthage, and his translation was a proclamation of annexation. This theory suggests that sailors from the ancient Mediterranean sailed across the Atlantic thousands of years ago. Other researchers have tried to link the markings to the Portuguese explorer Miguel Cortriel, who vanished in 1502, or to see in them an early, ideographic form of written Wampanoag. Yet, for every theory, there is a compelling counterargument. Mainstream scholars have largely dismissed these translations. When Norse runic expert Michael Barnes examined the stone, he stated definitively that the markings were not runic at all. More recently, archaeologist Craig Chartier of the Plymouth Archaeological Rediscovery Project took a fresh look. After a close examination, he concluded that the Bourne Stone is likely one of the most important late prehistoric to contact period artifacts ever identified in New England, but that it was created by the native people of the local Manomet/Herring Pond community. This would make it a magnificent and unique example of Native American petroglyphs, though its specific meaning may still be unknown to us. So we are left with a block of granite and a multitude of possibilities. Is it a message from Vikings, Carthaginians, or Portuguese explorers? Is it a sacred relic from the indigenous people of this land, its true significance faded from memory? Or is it something else entirely, its original context erased by time? The Bourne Stone guards its secret closely. It sits in silent testimony to the deep, layered history of this region, a riddle that continues to tantalize and frustrate all who seek to understand it. What forgotten story does this stone want to tell us? For now, the inscription remains mute, a cryptic whisper from the past that we have not yet learned to hear. In the quiet of the Freetown State Forest, there once stood a silent sentinel, a 50-foot-tall rock formation that bore a striking, uncanny resemblance to the profile of a human face. This was Profile Rock, a place where geology and legend met. For generations, many believed they were gazing upon the stony likeness of the great Wampanoag leader, Chief Massasoit Sachem, the father of Metacomet, who would later lead the conflict known as King Philip's War. The site was steeped in powerful stories. Some legends suggested that Metacomet, or King Philip himself, spent his last night alive sheltering beneath the rock's gaze before his death in the nearby conflict. This connection wove the formation directly into one of the most tragic and pivotal chapters of early New England history. Because of this, the rock became a sacred site for local tribes, who revered it as a monument to their great leader. Yet despite its deep indigenous associations, the rock's own history was curiously ambiguous. The face, as people knew it, doesn't appear to have been ancient. Evidence suggests it only came into existence sometime in the mid-1800s, likely an unintended consequence of quarrying with dynamite. Regardless of its true origin, the rock was adopted into Native American tradition and also gathered a more modern, darker folklore of its own, with local tales whispering of ghosts, satanic cults, and murder surrounding the site. For years, Profile Rock, also known as the Old Man of Joshua's Mountain, was a place of pilgrimage for the curious and the spiritual. But its story took a final, tragic turn in the summer of 2019. On June 19th, after reports of damage, park officials discovered that a large portion of the iconic rock formation had broken off. The face was gone, permanently closed to the public, leaving behind only photographs and memories. So what are we to make of Profile Rock? Was it merely a natural oddity, a random shape that our pattern-seeking minds meaning? Or did it become a genuine sacred site, its power derived not from its origin, but from the beliefs and stories projected onto it for over a century? If the latter is true, then its destruction is a double loss, not just of a curious geological feature, but of a modern monument to an ancient culture. The cliff face is now blank, leaving us to wonder if we ever truly saw what we believed we saw, and what other silent watchers in the Massachusetts landscape are still waiting to tell their stories. But not all mysteries are carved into stone. Some are built from whispers, maps, and the desperate hope for riches. Imagine a city on the coast of New England, so magnificent that its buildings were roofed in gold and its streets were paved with pearls. Its name was Norumbega, and for over a century it was the stuff of dreams for European explorers. The legend of this El Dorado of the North began to appear on maps in the 16th century. Cartographers placed it somewhere in New England, often around the Penobscot River in what is now Maine. The name itself is believed to come from an Algonquian word, possibly meaning quiet place between the rapids. But on these European maps, it was anything but quiet. It was depicted as a grand, wealthy metropolis, a beacon of civilization in an unknown land. The stories truly caught fire with the incredible account of David Ingram, an English sailor marooned in Mexico in 1567. Ingram claimed he then walked over 3,000 miles to the coast of Nova Scotia. Upon his return to Europe, he told a spellbound audience of a vast Native American kingdom he called Norumbega. He described a king who was carried on a chair of silver and crystal, and people who wore so many pearls and gold bracelets that they could barely walk. He spoke of a city half a mile long, with streets wider than those in London, and halls whose roofs were supported by pillars of polished crystal. According to Ingram, the very rivers were filled with lumps of gold the size of a man's hand. It was a tale so powerful that it launched expedition after expedition, all searching for this fabled city of riches. Samuel de Champlain himself, the famed French explorer, searched for Norumbega in 1604, sailing up the Penobscot River. He found only Native American villages, not a city of gold, and subsequent maps slowly erased Norumbega from existence. Yet the legend refused to die. In the late 19th century, it was resurrected in a surprising new form. A Harvard professor and baking powder magnate named Eben Horsford became obsessed with the idea that Norumbega was not a Native American city, but a Viking settlement. He believed the Norse explorer Leif Erikson had built a city and fort on the Charles River. Using his personal fortune, Horsford dedicated himself to proving this theory. He discovered the site of Leif's house in Cambridge, and farther west, the location of the great city itself. He even built a tall stone tower in Weston, Massachusetts, the Norumbega Tower, to commemorate what he claimed was the site of a Norse fort. His theories, though widely dismissed by scholars for a lack of evidence, were so popular that they left a permanent mark on the map, with places like Norumbega Park in Newton and Norumbega Road in Cambridge still bearing the name today. So, what was Norumbega? A simple misunderstanding of a Native American trading hub, its wealth in furs exaggerated into gold by wishful thinkers. A deliberate tall tale from a sailor looking for fame. Or, as Professor Horsford believed, the last echo of a Viking settlement in New England, a truth hidden in plain sight. The search for Norumbega forces us to confront the power of a good story. It is a mystery built not on evidence, but on desire. The desire for riches, for glory, and for a history that is more grand and mysterious than the one we know. Deep in the woods of Upton, Massachusetts, hidden within a quiet 7-acre park, lies an entrance to another world. It is a low, dark tunnel, 14 feet long, that leads into a vast, beehive-shaped dome of stone. This is the Upton Chamber, and it is one of the largest and most perfectly built of over 300 mysterious stone chambers found scattered throughout the New England landscape. For decades, this enigmatic underground room has been a silent puzzle, daring historians, archaeologists, and anyone who crawls inside to answer one simple question: who built it and why? The structure itself is a masterpiece of dry masonry, built without any mortar. The tunnel, just high enough to crouch in, opens up into a domed room about 12 feet in diameter and over 10 feet high. The ceiling is finished with massive capstones weighing several tons, all held in place by a jumbled yet deliberate arrangement of stone that has stood strong for centuries. The effort to construct it would have been immense, which is precisely what makes its origin so debated. The most conventional explanation is that it was built by early European settlers, perhaps in the 1700s, as a root cellar for storing food. Another theory suggests it was used by a local leather tanner in the 1800s. These are logical, grounded ideas. But there is a problem with this timeline, a problem revealed by science. In 2011, an archaeological investigation took soil samples from the chamber's entrance and used a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL, to date the last time the stones were exposed to sunlight. The results were startling. The tests indicated the chamber was built between 1350 and 1625 AD. This is before any significant English settlement in the area, which didn't begin until around 1660. If these dates are correct, the Upton Chamber predates the colonists. So if they didn't build it, who did? This is where the mystery truly deepens. Some researchers point to the chamber's striking resemblance to underground stone structures found in Ireland, known as souterrains or foggas. This similarity has led to a captivating theory. Could the Upton Chamber be evidence of pre-Columbus European explorers, perhaps Irish monks who traveled to the Americas in the 8th century and built this cave-like structure? It's a radical idea, one that challenges the mainstream historical narrative. Others believe the answer lies with the indigenous people of the land. The chamber lies along the Great Trail, a famed indigenous trade route that stretched from Delaware to Canada. Could the Nipmuc people, who lived in the area, have constructed it as a spiritual or ceremonial site? Despite these compelling theories, no Native American artifacts have been found inside to confirm this. The chamber gives up no easy clues. Adding another layer of intrigue, two archaeologists studying the site in the 1970s hypothesized that the chamber was an ancient astronomical observatory. They suggested it was used around 700 AD to observe the setting of the Pleiades star cluster and the summer solstice, aligning with large stone mounds on a nearby hill. If true, this would mean the Upton Chamber is not just an old cellar, but a sophisticated celestial calendar, a place where ancient people gathered to mark the passage of the cosmos. Today, the chamber is preserved as part of Upton Heritage Park, its future secure, but its past remains an open question. Was it a colonial pantry, a sacred Native American site, or the work of long-forgotten transatlantic voyagers? The cool, dark silence of the Upton Chamber offers no answers, only a lasting echo of a history we are still trying to understand. In the town of Rehoboth, not far from a quiet stretch of Route 44, a massive conglomerate rock formation rises from the edge of a swamp. This is Anawan Rock, a site of profound historical and spiritual significance. Its story does not involve unknown builders or cryptic inscriptions, but rather marks the final, tragic act of a bloody conflict that shaped early America. This is where the last stand of the Wampanoag resistance ended, not with a battle, but with a surrender and a promise that would be brutally broken. To understand the weight of this place, we must go back to the summer of 1676. King Philip's War, a devastating conflict between English colonists and a coalition of Native American tribes led by the Wampanoag sachem Metacomet, known as King Philip, was nearing its end. The tide had turned decisively in favor of the colonists. In early August, Metacomet was tracked down and killed in a swamp near Mount Hope. His body was quartered and his head displayed on a pole for years. With their leader gone, the remaining Wampanoag forces were led by an old, respected war chief named Anawan, who had once been a captain under Metacomet's father, Massasoit. Anawan was a subtle and resolved man, a legendary warrior who had sworn he would never be taken alive. He and his band of warriors, along with their women and children, moved constantly, using the treacherous, swampy terrain around Anawan Rock as their refuge, never spending 2 nights in the same place. The man tasked with hunting him down was Captain Benjamin Church of Plymouth Colony. A bold and experienced Indian fighter, Church learned from local informants that Anawan was camped at the rock. On the night of August 28, 1676, Church, with only a handful of men, made a daring decision. He would risk a night raid. Under cover of darkness, Church and his men silently crept into the swamp, using native guides to infiltrate the camp. They found Anawan and his son sleeping, surrounded by their warriors. In a moment of intense drama, Church and his men sprang forward, grabbing the chief and his son before an alarm could be raised. The old chief, seeing himself surrounded, uttered the word "Howl, I am taken." What happened next was extraordinary. Rather than immediately marching his prisoners away, Church sat down with Anawan and shared a steak dinner there in the swamp. Through translators, Church promised to plead for Anawan's life with the Plymouth authorities. Later that night, Anawan, who Church discovered spoke perfect English, presented him with a sacred bundle. It contained the royal regalia of the Wampanoag leadership, magnificent wampum belts, 9 inches broad that reached a man's ankles, headdresses, and glazed powder horns. It was a symbolic surrender of the entire nation. Despite Church's efforts to keep his word, the Plymouth officials would not honor his promise of mercy. Anawan was taken to Plymouth and beheaded, his head placed on a pole alongside Metacomet's, the final, grisly punctuation to a brutal war. Because of this tragic history, the rock has gained a reputation for being haunted. Visitors and paranormal researchers have reported phantom campfires, strange voices crying out the war call Iutash, which means fight on, and eerie screams in the woods. Whether these are the echoes of that fateful night or simply the sounds of the swamp, Anawan Rock stands as a somber monument. It is a place that forces us to remember the broken treaties and the devastating cost of conflict, a silent witness to the end of a world. In the deep, quiet woods of Lynn, Massachusetts, there is a place where the lines between history and legend, determination and delusion are forever blurred. This is Dighton Rock, the site of a centuries-old pirate mystery and a haunting, decades-long quest guided by a voice from beyond the grave. It is a story of a hidden fortune, a tragic entombment, and one family's life-consuming effort to find the truth, an effort that left a permanent scar in the New England landscape. Our story begins not in the age of archaeology, but in the golden age of piracy, back in the middle of the 1600s. The tale, first published in an 1829 history of Lynn, tells of a pirate named Thomas Veal. According to the legend, Veal and his crew sailed up the Saugus River, where they traded silver for tools and supplies, including shackles and hatchets from the local iron works. They established a hideout in a place now known as Pirates' Glen, but when authorities eventually raided their camp, Veal was the only one to escape. He fled deep into the woods, taking refuge in a natural cave where he was said to have hidden the crew's treasure. For a while, he lived a surprisingly quiet life, even working as a shoemaker for the locals. But then, in 1658, a powerful earthquake struck New England. The tremor caused the mouth of Veal's cave to collapse, sealing him inside with his treasure, forever lost to the world. The site became known as the Pirates' Dungeon, a name that would, over time, soften to Dighton Rock. The legend simmered for nearly 200 years, a local folktale that sparked occasional, fruitless attempts to dig through the rubble. But the story truly reignited in 1852, when a man named Hiram Marble purchased the land. Hiram was a spiritualist, part of a movement that believed it was possible to communicate with the dead, and he was convinced he had made contact with the spirit of the long-dead pirate Thomas Veal. The ghost, speaking through seances and mediums, supposedly urged Hiram to dig, promising to lead him to the hidden treasure. It was even said that the exterior of the rock formation itself, which bears a passing resemblance to a human skull, was the sign Hiram needed to trust the ghostly guidance. Driven by this otherworldly assurance, Hiram, and later his son Edwin, began a monumental task. With hammers, chisels, and dynamite, they started to carve a tunnel straight down through the solid rock. They worked at a grueling pace, sometimes advancing only a single foot every 30 days, and they didn't dig in a straight line. The turns and curves in their tunnel were dictated by the instructions they received from Veal's spirit during their regular seances. They were literally following a ghost's directions. As their savings dwindled, the Marbles began charging tourists a quarter to tour the growing cave and even sold bonds, promising investors a share of the treasure they were so certain they would find. For years, the work continued. Hiram Marble died in 1868, but his son Edwin carried on, relentlessly digging, until he himself passed away in 1880, nearly 3 decades after the first blast. In the end, they had carved a twisting, 174-foot-long tunnel deep into the earth, but they never found a single coin. So, what are we to make of this enduring mystery? Was there ever a treasure to be found? Skeptics, including historians, point out that the entire story of Thomas Veal first appeared in print nearly 200 years after the alleged events, with no contemporary records to support it. Some even speculate that the original author, when questioned, could only cite local tradition as his source. Furthermore, a modern park ranger at the site has noted that the Marbles, despite their decades of labor, had actually veered in the wrong direction almost from the start, digging far below and away from where the original cave would have been. Their spiritual guide, it seems, led them astray. Yet the legend refuses to die. The cave the Marbles created still exists today, a dark, damp, and cold tunnel that descends into the rock, ending in a pool of stagnant water. It is open to the public for a few hours each week, a place where visitors can still go and feel the weight of the mystery for themselves. And in a strange, poetic twist, Hiram Marble's failed quest ultimately led to a different kind of treasure. He had once promised that if he found the pirate's fortune, he would use the money to buy the surrounding land and create a public park for the city of Lynn. He never lived to see that dream realized, but in 1881, the city did purchase the land, forming the massive Lynn Woods Reservation that we know today. So, while the pirate gold of Thomas Veal may forever remain a legend, the park that is Hiram Marble's true legacy stands as a beautiful, tangible gift to future generations. The treasure, it turns out, was not hidden in the rock, but was the rock itself and the wild forest that surrounds it. Nestled along the muddy banks of the Taunton River in Massachusetts lies a mystery carved in stone. A massive 40-ton boulder known as Dighton Rock sits silently, its dark surface covered in a dense tapestry of intricate markings, grooves, and mysterious figures. For over 300 years, this enigmatic slab has dared historians, archaeologists, and anyone who sees it to solve its puzzle. Who created these intricate symbols? When were they carved? And what message, lost to centuries of shifting tides and passing time, were they meant to convey? The rock itself is a spectacle of nature, an 11-foot-long chunk of crystalline sandstone that was once entirely exposed at low tide. But it is the man-made, or perhaps we should say, the mystery maker-made inscriptions that have captivated and confounded generations. The surface is a chaotic yet deliberate gallery of lines, geometric shapes, stick-figure humans, sailing vessels, and writing that resembles letters from alphabets no one can quite place. The problem is, the inscriptions don't clearly belong to any one culture or time period. They are a palimpsest of possibilities, a Rorschach test in stone where every observer sees a different story. One of the earliest and most persistent theories points a finger across the Atlantic. In the 1600s, colonists first documented the rock, and many were convinced the markings were left by early Portuguese explorers. The most famous proponent of this idea was a man named Miguel Cortreal, a Portuguese nobleman who vanished off the coast of North America in 1502. Could Dighton Rock be his lasting memorial, a message carved by his crew stating their fate? Some researchers claim to see Portuguese words, a shield, and even a cross in the weathered lines. But critics argue the translations are forced, seeing what they want to see in the ambiguous grooves. But what if the story is even older? Another compelling theory suggests that the carvers were not Europeans, but Vikings. The Norse are known to have reached North America around the year 1000, establishing a short-lived settlement at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland. Could their expeditions have traveled as far south as modern-day Massachusetts? Some see a clear Norse rune, a hooked X among the inscriptions, potentially spelling out the name Thorfinn or marking the territory of Karlsefni, another Viking explorer. If true, this would rewrite the history of European contact with the New World, placing Norse explorers deep into New England centuries before Columbus. Yet, like the Portuguese theory, it remains hotly debated, with many runologists dismissing the interpretation as wishful thinking. Then there are the theories that push the timeline back even further, into the truly ancient world. Could the markings be the work of the Phoenicians, that legendary seafaring civilization from the Mediterranean? They were known to have sailed far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and some have speculated their voyages could have taken them to the Americas. The symbols on Dighton Rock, they argue, bear a resemblance to Phoenician or other early Iberian scripts. This theory, while captivating, lacks any corroborating archaeological evidence in the region. It is a solitary clue without a crime scene. And we cannot forget the indigenous peoples of the region. The most grounded theory is that the rock is a sacred site for local Native American tribes, such as the Wampanoag or Narragansett. The petroglyphs could represent spiritual symbols, clan signatures, or a historical record of events. The Algonquian peoples have a long and rich tradition of rock art. Perhaps Dighton Rock is a magnificent example of this, a library of stone holding stories we can no longer read. Yet, even tribal elders in recent centuries have admitted they do not know the origin or meaning of the markings, suggesting they are ancient even to them. The rock became such a source of national fascination that a museum was built around it in the 1970s, now protecting it from the elements. It has been studied, drawn, cast in plaster, and photographed countless times. Yet the central mystery remains stubbornly intact. Every potential answer raises more questions. If it was the Portuguese, why is there no other trace of their settlement? If it was the Vikings, where are the ruins of their camp? The rock stands alone, a silent witness to a story we can only guess at. It forces us to wonder about the paths not taken, the voyages lost to history, and the possibility that the history of this continent is far more complex and interconnected than our textbooks ever let on. What forgotten explorer stood on this riverbank and felt the need to leave their mark for eternity? And what were they trying to tell us? Deep within the sprawling Gilbert Hills State Forest in Massachusetts, away from the main trails and the casual hiker's gaze, the landscape holds a secret. This is not a mystery of a single object, like Dighton Rock, but something far more expansive and integrated into the very earth. Scattered across this rocky, forested terrain are enigmatic stone structures that defy easy explanation. These are not the orderly stone walls of colonial farmers, nor are they the simple piles of rocks cleared from a field. These are complex arrangements, low, ceremonial-looking chambers, stone rows that snake over the hillsides, and massive perched boulders balanced in ways that seem to defy mere chance. Who built them, and for what possible purpose? The answers are shrouded in the deep shadows of the forest. The most common features are what are often called stone chambers. These are subterranean or semi-subterranean rooms built from massive, unmortared stone slabs, often roofed with colossal capstones that weigh several tons. Walking into one is an eerie experience. The temperature drops, the light fades, and the only sound is the quiet hum of the forest outside. They are frequently aligned with specific celestial events. Some are designed so that on the solstices or equinoxes, the rising or setting sun perfectly illuminates the dark interior chamber, casting a beam of light onto a specific back wall or stone. This is not the work of farmers storing potatoes. This suggests a deep, sophisticated understanding of astronomy and a desire to mark the passage of time and seasons. So who built them? The conventional and most widely accepted explanation is that they are colonial-era structures, built by 17th or 18th century European settlers. They are sometimes called root cellars, used to store food and keep it cool throughout the year. Proponents of this theory point out that the construction, while impressive, uses techniques available to colonial farmers. They argue that the celestial alignments are simply coincidental, a product of how the chambers were oriented for practical reasons, like avoiding the prevailing wind. It is a logical, grounded explanation, but for many who visit these sites, it feels incomplete. This is where the mystery deepens, and the theories become more speculative. A growing number of researchers and archaeologists point to features that seem inconsistent with purely colonial origins. They note that some of these chambers are built into the sides of hills in a way that resembles ancient Irish or Scottish Neolithic tombs, known as souterrains or fagus. The architectural similarities are striking. Could these be the work of pre-Columbian transoceanic visitors? Could Celtic monks, the legendary Irish voyagers, have reached New England long before Columbus and constructed these sacred, hidden spaces? It is a radical idea, one that challenges the mainstream historical narrative, but the structural parallels are difficult to ignore entirely. Another, even more profound theory connects the sites to the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The forest was, and is, the ancestral land of Native American tribes. It is well documented that many eastern woodland tribes used stonework and had a rich ceremonial life deeply tied to the landscape. Perhaps these chambers are not European at all, but are the remains of sacred Native American sweat lodges, ceremonial spaces, or astronomical observatories. The Algonquian peoples have a deep spiritual connection to the solstice cycles. Could the Gilbert Hills complex be a monumental expression of that connection? A sprawling, open-air temple that has been misunderstood for centuries? If so, it would represent one of the most significant and complex Native American stoneworks in North America. Then there are the other puzzling features. The Vision Quest caves, small, cramped niches in rock formations where one might sit in isolation. The perfectly balanced rocks that seem to have been placed, not dropped by a glacier. The intricate stone rows that do not mark property boundaries, but instead seem to point toward water sources or other significant landscape features. When you look at the Gilbert Hills not as a collection of random structures, but as a single, interconnected complex, a haunting picture begins to emerge. It suggests a site of profound spiritual importance, a place where the architecture was designed to harmonize with the natural world and the cosmos above. The true history of the Gilbert Hills stone sites remains one of Massachusetts' greatest enigmas. Were they the pragmatic work of farmers, the sacred architecture of a lost Celtic voyage, or the ceremonial heart of an ancient Native American spiritual tradition? The forest keeps its secrets well. The stones do not speak, but they stand as a powerful reminder that the land beneath our feet holds layers of history, some of which we are only just beginning to perceive. Walking among them, you are left with an unsettling and thrilling question. What if the story of America's ancient past is still waiting to be fully unearthed?